Shalom, I'm Rabbi David, and I need to tell you something that's going to sound controversial, maybe even heretical to some of you. Most of you are working way too long. You're sacrificing the best years of your life for a retirement age that was invented by politicians, not by wisdom. And you're doing it because you've been lied to about what retirement actually requires. I'm 52 years old. I retired 3 years ago, and it was the best decision I ever made. Not because I stopped working, I didn't, but because I stopped working for money and started working for meaning. And here's what shocked me. I could have retired 10 years earlier, maybe even 15. But I didn't know it, because I believed the same lies you probably believe right now. Today I'm going to reveal 7 signs that you should retire earlier than you think, and I'm going to show you why the traditional retirement age of 65 is not only arbitrary, but potentially devastating to your health, your relationships, and your purpose. But first, let me destroy the biggest lie you've been told about retirement. You've been told that retirement is about accumulating enough money so you can stop working and live off your savings until you die. That retirement is the finish line, the reward for decades of hard work, the golden years where you finally get to relax. This is a lie, a dangerous, soul-crushing lie. Let me tell you where this lie came from. In 1889, Otto von Bismarck, the Chancellor of Germany, created the world's first government pension system, and he set the retirement age at 65. Why 65? Because the average life expectancy at the time was 67. He designed a system where most people would die before they could collect. It was never about giving people time to rest. It was about political optics. And we've been following this arbitrary number ever since, even though life expectancy has increased by 20 years, even though the nature of work has completely changed. Even though 65 makes absolutely no sense anymore. To replace your income, you need to cover your expenses, and not all your expenses, just your basic needs. Let me give you an example from my own life. When I was 45, I was making about $250,000 a year. My lifestyle consumed about $180,000 of that. I thought, I need at least $4.5 million saved to retire using the 4% rule. But then I did something radical. I asked myself, what do I actually need to be happy? Not what I wanted, what I needed. I needed a home. I needed food. I needed health care. I needed the ability to give to my community. I needed some travel. I needed books and learning. When I added it all up, my actual needs were about $60,000 a year. Everything else was luxury. Everything else was lifestyle inflation. Everything else was ego. At the time, I had rental properties generating $40,000 a year. I had dividend income generating $25,000 a year. That's $65,000. My needs were covered. I could have retired at 45, but I didn't know it, because I was chasing a number that had nothing to do with my actual needs. In Deuteronomy 8:3 it says, "Man does not live on bread alone." But here's what most people miss. Man does live on bread. You need bread. You need basics. But once those are covered, more bread doesn't make you more alive. If your passive income covers your basic needs, you can retire. Everything else is choice. Sign number 2. You find yourself saying, "I'll do that when I retire." This is a huge red flag, and most people don't even realize they're doing it. "I'll travel when I retire." "I'll learn that language when I retire." "I'll spend more time with my grandchildren when I retire." "I'll write that book when I retire." Every time you say this, you're making a dangerous assumption that you'll be healthy enough, energetic enough, and alive enough to do it later. Let me tell you about my friend Mo's service. It's contributing. It's creating value. It's making the world better. But somewhere along the way, most people's work stops being avoda and becomes just a paycheck, just a grind, just something to endure until Friday. If you've lost your why at work, if you're just going through the motions, if you're counting down the days until retirement, you're already retired in your heart. Your body just hasn't caught up yet. I see this all the time. People in their 50s who are physically at work, but mentally checked out. They're not creating. They're not growing. They're not contributing. They're just surviving. And here's what's tragic. They think they have to keep doing this for another 10 or 15 years. But they don't. Let me tell you about Sarah. Sarah was a corporate lawyer. She made great money, but she hated every minute of it. She'd been doing it for 25 years, and she had another 10 years until her planned retirement at 65. I asked her, "Why are you waiting?" She said, "Because I need the money." I asked, "Do you really, or do you just think you do?" We ran the numbers. She had enough saved, her kids were grown, her mortgage was almost paid off. She could retire immediately. She said, "But what would I do?" I said, "What do you want to do?" She said, "I've always wanted to teach. I've always wanted to mentor young lawyers. I've always wanted to write." I said, "So do that. You don't need permission. You don't need to wait until 65. You can transition now." She retired 6 months later. She now teaches part-time at a law school, mentors young lawyers, and is writing a book. She makes about a third of what she used to make, and she's happier than she's been in 20 years. In the Talmud, it says, "Who is rich? He who is satisfied with his portion." Sarah is rich now, not because she has more money, because she has more life. If you've lost your why at work, that's a sign you started living. 5 years later, he's healthier than he was at 50. And he told me, "The only regret I have is that I didn't do this 10 years earlier." In 3 John 1:2, it says, "I pray that you may enjoy good health, and that all may go well with you, even as your soul is getting along well." Health is not secondary to wealth. Health is wealth. If you're sacrificing your health for your career, that's a sign you should retire immediately, not in 5 years, not when you hit some number, immediately. Sign number 5. You have more money than time. This is a strange sign, but it's one of the most important. At some point in your life, the equation flips. When you're young, you have more time than money. You have energy, health, decades ahead of you, but you're broke. As you age, you accumulate money, but you lose time. Your energy decreases, your health declines, your remaining years shrink. And at some point, you cross a threshold where you have more money than you'll ever be able to spend, but less time than you need to do everything you want to do. If you've crossed that threshold, you should retire, because time is now your scarcest resource, and you can't buy more of it. I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to answer honestly. If you died tomorrow, would you regret how you spent your time? Or would you regret how much money you didn't make? Most people, if they're honest, would regret the time, the moments with family they missed, the experiences they postponed, the dreams they never pursued. In Ecclesiastes 3:1, it says, "There is a time for everything, and a season for every activity under the heavens." There's a season for building wealth, and there's a season for spending it, for using it, for living it. If you have more money than time, you're in the wrong season. It's time to transition. Sign number 6. Your children are grown and you barely know them. This one hurts, but it's true for so many people. You spend 20, 30, 40 years working. Young. Don't make the mistake of waiting until retirement to be present. Retire earlier. Be there now, while it still matters. Sign number 7. You're living for the weekend. This is the most common sign, and it's the saddest. If you're constantly counting down the days until Friday, if the only thing that gets you through the week is knowing that Saturday is coming, if you're living for the weekend and dreading Monday, you're not living, you're surviving. And here's the math. If you work 5 days a week and live for 2 days a week, you're only truly alive 28% of the time. That's not a life. That's a prison sentence. I'm not saying every day has to be perfect. I'm not saying work should always be fun. But if you fundamentally dread the majority of your waking hours, something is deeply wrong. And the solution isn't to endure it for another 10 or 15 years until retirement. The solution is to change it now. In the Torah, God rested on the 7th day, not because he was tired, but because rest is sacred. Rest is part of the design. But notice, God didn't work 6 days that he hated so he could enjoy 1 day of rest. The work itself was good, and God saw that it was good. Your work should be good, not every moment, but fundamentally it should be good. It should be meaningful. It should be something you want to do, not just something you have to do. If you're living for the weekend, that's a sign you should retire earlier than you think, or, at minimum, transition to work that you don't dread. Now, let me address what I know you're thinking. Rabbi, this all sounds great, but I can't afford to retire early. I don't have enough money. Maybe, but probably not. Here's what I've learned after helping hundreds of families with retirement planning. Most people dramatically overestimate how much they need to retire, and they dramatically underestimate how much they already have. They think they need $2 million, $3 million, $5 million. But when we actually run the numbers based on their real needs through these 7 signs, honestly assess where you are. And if you recognize even 3 or 4 of these signs, start planning. Start running the numbers. Start imagining what early retirement could look like. Because here's the truth. You're probably closer than you think. And life is too short to spend it working when you could be living. In the comments below, tell me, which of these 7 signs hit you the hardest? Are you closer to early retirement than you thought? And if this video challenged you, if it made you rethink your timeline, subscribe to this channel. Next week, I'm going to show you the exact formula I use to retire at 49, including the numbers, the strategy, and the mistakes I made along the way. Remember what Moses said in Deuteronomy 30:19. I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Now choose life. Every day you spend in a job you hate, sacrificing your health, postponing your dreams, missing your family, that's choosing death. Not literal death, but death of purpose, death of joy, death of life. Choose life. And maybe that means retiring earlier than you think. Shalom. And until next time. Before you go, I need to tell you one more thing. Something that nobody talks about, but everyone needs to hear. Early retirement isn't just about leaving your job. It's about finding your calling. In the Jewish tradition, we have a concept called tikkun olam, repairing the world. The idea that each of us has a unique purpose, a unique contribution that only we can make. But here's the problem. Most people never discover their tikkun olam because they're too busy working, too busy earning, too busy surviving. They spend 40 years in a career that pays the bills but doesn't fulfill their purpose. And by the time they retire, they're too tired, too old, or too disconnected to figure out what their purpose even is. This is the real tragedy of working too long. Not that you miss vacations or weekends, but that you miss purpose. He felt like he was making a difference. He said to me, "Rabbi, I wish I'd done this 20 years ago. I could have transitioned earlier. I could have spent the last 20 years doing this instead of doing tax returns." That's the cost of working too long. Not just the money you could have spent, but the purpose you could have lived. In the Talmud, there's a teaching. In the world to come, each person will be asked, did you fulfill your purpose? Did you become who you were meant to be? Not, did you make a lot of money? Not, did you have a successful career? But, did you fulfill your purpose? If you retire early, you give yourself time to discover that purpose, time to experiment, time to try things, time to fail, time to find what you're actually meant to do. But if you wait until 65, you might run out of time. Now, I know some of you are thinking, but Rabbi, I like my job. I don't want to retire early. Good, then don't. This isn't about everyone retiring early. This is about not working longer than you need to just because society tells you to. If you love your work, if it gives you purpose, if it energizes you, keep doing it. Work until you're 70, 80, 90. Work until you can't anymore. But make sure you're working because you want to, not because you think you have to. Make sure you're working for purpose, not just for money. Because here's the secret. When you work for purpose instead of money, it stops being work. It becomes calling. It becomes service. It becomes avodah. And that's what the Torah teaches. Moses led the Israelites until he was 120. But he wasn't working for a paycheck. He was fulfilling his purpose. That's the goal, not to stop working, but to transition from working for money to working for meaning. And for most people, that transition should happen earlier than they think. Let me close with a story. In the Talmud, there's a teaching about a man named Honi the circle maker. One day, Honi saw an old man planting a carob tree. He asked, "How long?" Start transitioning. Start discovering your purpose. Because the world needs what you have to offer. And it needs it now. Not in 10 years. Not when you retire. Now. In the Torah, God calls Moses at 80 years old. Moses says, "I'm too old. Send someone else." But God says, "No, you're the one. Now is the time. Maybe now is your time. Maybe you're ready to retire earlier than you think. Maybe you're ready to transition from earning to serving, from working to calling. The 7 signs are there. The question is, will you listen to them? Shalom, and until next time.